From the WKYT studios in Lexington, this is Kentucky Newsmakers with Bill Bryant.
Good morning from WKYT News. Welcome to a packed edition of Kentucky Newsmakers. Later we'll hear from the independent candidate for Lieutenant Governor who was not invited to this week's televised debate. Heather Curtis will be here later. First, we'll be hearing from the Kentucky State Auditor and his opponent in the November election. And that's where we began, as Auditor Adam Edlin, who's a Democrat, is seeking a second term. He's facing a challenge from Republican State Representative Mike Harmon. This week, Edlin made news in his official capacity by announcing the processing of untested rape kits that have been held by law enforcement for years. Auditor Adam Edlin joining us first on Kentucky Newsmakers. And welcome. Appreciate you coming in.
It's good to be back.
On this matter of untested rape kits, do you think crimes will be prosecuted or cases now can be cleared because this evidence is now out there?
There's no question. When we identified that there were 3,090 untested rape kits in the state, it really was stomach churning, because these don't just represent numbers, they represent the fragility of human life. And it's important to have the kit processed. And Bill, it's very important for your viewers to understand what goes into this kit. A victim of a sexual assault volunteers for a medical review that is excruciating and re-traumatizing. It takes 2 to 6 hours. And the evidence collected goes into the rape kit, and then it's tested to compare it against the National Criminal DNA Database. So this is extraordinarily important. And I want to point out that this is a national scandal. I mean, this literally touches every jurisdiction in the United States. We think that there are a few 100,000 of these unprocessed kits nationally, but we now know that Kentucky's share is more than 3,000. And in getting that number, we're now able to leverage national resources to clean up the backlog. And in communities where that backlog has been cleaned up, the results have been overwhelming. For instance, in Detroit, where there was a backlog of about 12,000, they have tested 3,000 of that backlog and have identified more than 300 potential serial rapists. So there's no doubt that as a result of our coordinated efforts, there are people walking the streets today who believe they've gotten away with this crime or crimes. Remember, 2/3 to 90% of rapists are serial rapists. These are people who repeatedly commit this crime, and they're also serial criminals.
Well, why did this happen in the first place?
This backlog has occurred, and again, it really has happened in almost every jurisdiction in the country, but we've had a couple of the confluence of a series of unfortunate events. One, we have seen an incredible increase in the demand for forensic evidence by juries in order to return guilty verdicts, and this is known as the CSI effect. And it's that because of the popular culture, we're now conditioned to demand mountains of forensic evidence and a whole host of crimes in order for juries to return guilty verdicts. At precisely the same time that we've seen that increase, we have significantly cut the number of resources we invest in law enforcement. And when you lay that over with the fact that we have more than 400 different law enforcement agencies in Kentucky, 300 that collect this kind of forensic evidence, and almost as many differing policies and procedures for how to handle that evidence, what you have are the conditions that have brought us to the sorry state we're in now.
Was it stunning to you to find this was going on in Kentucky, that there were that many untested kits?
It turned my stomach, and we've done a lot of work in the auditor's office over the last 4 years, but I can tell you we have never worked on an issue that has had the emotional toll, not just on me, but on the investigators and policy advisors who were working on this really important effort. Because 3,000, any number is unacceptable. But when you're talking about more than 3,000 untested kits, and you recognize that every one of these kits represents a human life to some degree at its most vulnerable, it really is something that, again, turns your stomach. And the only way to get through it is to commit ourselves to building a system that works better to bring peace to victims and justice to perpetrators.
Well, we mentioned up top you're a candidate for re-election. Kentucky is a poor state where a waste of tax dollars is especially hurtful. Do you feel that you have done your best in your first term in office to root out waste and misspending?
I do, and we've conducted as many special examinations, special investigations in 4 years as my predecessor, who was the gold standard of auditors, as she was able to do in 8. We have expanded the office into new areas. You know, I'm the first state auditor to ever get involved in public education, tracking how our dollars are spent inside of school systems, and to net effect, we've sent one superintendent to prison and another one just pled guilty and is going to pay restitution to his district. But that expansion is important because we've got to track every dollar. And it occurred to me that it's difficult to claim to be the taxpayer watchdog if you're not in education, which to me represents among the most moral, important obligations of government, to make sure that the next generation is prepared to provide for themselves and to compete in a global economy, and then to make sure that those dollars are getting to the classroom.
As you have attempted to broaden that scope, there has been pushback. You've been sued for looking into the city's financial dealings in Somerset. Do you feel your office has the standing to go into city halls as well as the schools and the county governments?
Absolutely. I believe that we have a legislative and statutory mandate to evaluate the efficiency, the effectiveness, and above all, the integrity with which every public resource is spent. And I think it speaks volume that the city of Somerset came to a better conclusion and decided to drop the lawsuit.
What has been the biggest surprise to you while serving as state auditor in terms of maybe some of the waste you have found, or have there been pleasant surprises?
Well, there have been plenty of both. I mean, when you, for instance, on the rape kit front, while that has been an enormous surprise into the magnitude of this problem and how it impacts literally every community in Kentucky. But on the positive side of the ledger, we went out and had a series of public hearings in every corner of Kentucky. And in Hardin County, for instance, their sexual assault response team that brings together the prosecutors and law enforcement and victims advocates all to coordinate how they respond to these cases is one of the best examples of good government that I have ever seen anywhere. So there is an awful lot of good there are an awful lot of good things going on in Kentucky. I think what's important for elected officials like me in Frankfort to understand is we've got to build on the good things happening in Kentucky by doing big, important things, whether it be making sure that we're fully funding the crime lab, so we're putting government on the side of rape victims, whether it means we're making sure that every dollar that gets to the classroom rather than is consumed by educational bureaucracies. That's awfully important. But we've got a lot of work yet to do, and I'm excited about what we've done, but I'm awfully excited about what's in front of us.
Often, and you're sort of referring to these performance audits, where you look into how a program is performing. Is it doing what the legislature intended it to do when it was set up? Do you find that that is almost as important as finding the occasional misdeed with money?
There's no question, because you know, a dollar lost to corruption or a dollar lost to inefficiency or just plain being dumb is a dollar that's just as gone. So making sure that we can make government smarter, more efficient, and more honest has been the focus of my administration, and we're going to keep it up.
It's widely talked about in political circles that you may run for the U.S. Senate next year, when Republican Rand Paul is running for a second term while also running for president. You have criticized him for that. Would you have reservations about accepting a second four-year term from the voters and immediately turning around and declaring for another office?
Well, my focus, as I've made clear from the beginning, is continuing the very good work that we've done as state auditor, and it's one in which we've earned a bipartisan level of support. My goodness, I was just endorsed by the Republican state senator from Somerset. So we've built a strong bipartisan record of accomplishment. I've been clear that the U.S. Senate race is not on my radar screen right now. And for the next number of days, I want to focus on telling the people of Kentucky about the very good work that we've done and get a mandate to continue that work, because the business of being the taxpayer watchdog, as you said, in a state that's as poor as ours, is incredibly important.
It's difficult to do the official duties and also be out there campaigning as you're doing for re-election?
You know, not really. I think I'm known as a high-energy guy, so we spend a lot of time, you know, I obviously work hard, and I enjoy the politics side of it as well. But, you know, when I'm not working, my priority is, you know, going to Little League ball games. I've got, you know, twin boys who turned 10 last week, Bill. I can't believe it. But I've learned that you can accomplish almost anything if you're willing to give up sleep. You sort of know the feeling.
I understand that. All right. State Auditor Adam Edlin, thank you. Appreciate it very much. And we'll be back in a moment with a Republican candidate for State Auditor, Mike Harmon, on WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. Welcome back to WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. We just heard from State Auditor Adam Edlin, and now his Republican opponent is with us. State Representative Mike Harmon of Danville is the GOP nominee. Harmon makes it clear that he wants the job and he would work to uncover waste in government, but he also acknowledges that slowing down Edam's political momentum is something he's interested in as well. Representative Harmon is joining us today, and we welcome you. Thanks for coming.
Bill, glad you have me here.
Interesting story you were telling me about your major in college.
Oh, yes, I graduated graduated Eastern Kentucky University with a triple major in math, statistics, and theater. I tell everybody that way I know the math, I know the stats, and what I don't know, I just act like I know. So, in Frankfort, it's worked out quite well. So.
Well, that might serve you well if
Yes.
you get the opportunity to try to uncover a waste and identify problems in state government. How do you think you might approach things differently than what the present auditor is doing?
Well, I think the first thing we want to do is, I've had an opportunity as I travel to state to talk to a lot of the judge executives and some of the other leaders, and some of the things that Adam's done, they're okay with, but I've had a lot of opportunity to talk to people that had some concerns. So the first thing I would like to do, and I call it my audit the auditor process, to go in and just make sure that everything's done correctly. I will tell you that I've had some judge executives tell me that they've received audit bills without the audit and had some concerns with there. Also, when I've gone and talked to some of the smaller communities, I didn't really find this in the larger communities, but some of the smaller communities, typically the audit from the state auditor, the cost of it was 2 to 3 times what it would be just to bring in a private auditor. So I kind of want to take a look at that and see if we can find, help the counties save money in addition to finding waste and corruption. So.
He's been sued by the city of Somerset because they say he shouldn't be looking at the city's finances. Well, how do you feel about that?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I had an opportunity. I went and I sat down with the mayor of Somerset and some of the other members of the board, and it was kind of interesting. They said that he came in, and they have to call it a special examination. They can't call it an audit, and the reason they can't call it an audit is because he did an open records request, and not a single examiner was a CPA, which I thought was kind of interesting. And then when they finally settled on that $50,000 bill as opposed to the $100,000, he asked for detail. Whenever you're doing an audit or your attorney, they get a billing, so many hours along that lines. Well, he was basically told that he was not going to get any detail in that regards.
Does the fact that he was looking for waste wherever it may be, though, in a city government, when normally the auditors have done the schools and the county governments and within state government, are you supportive of the fact that he went after a city government?
Well, I think it's important that, regardless of what government entity is, that you go in and you take a look at it. But I think it would be important, especially if you're doing like I said, they call it a special examination, but if you're doing a similar audit, it's important to bring CPAs with you. It's also important that you get all the facts. It was kind of a little odd. My opponent also had 2 fundraisers there in Somerset during the same time he was doing it, so there's some question as the intent behind it as well.
In his official capacity, he can make news, as he did this week with the releasing of the fact that there have been 3,000 untested rape kits in Kentucky that have been held by law enforcement. Are you supportive of that move?
Definitely supportive. As a matter of fact, we talked a little bit off air. One of the reasons that he was doing that is we, as the House and the Senate, passed Senate Joint Resolution 20. Which directed him to actually go ahead and get a count of those. So very supportive of that. I'm glad to see, Mitch McConnell finding a little additional money to help with that as well. It's kind of sad when these young ladies go through such a traumatic process and then not to have that tested. So I was glad that we went ahead and pursued that.
Does the fact that Kentucky is a relatively poor state mean that we need to be more aggressive than maybe other states in rooting out waste of tax money?
We've got to. I mean, we face some tremendous problems. I mean, if you look both from a poverty level, but also look at where we're at with our pension plans. Currently, when they go to the different accounting standards, we're going to be anywhere from 41 to 42 billion with the B underfunded in our pension plans. If you look at our normal general fund budget, not counting the road fund budget, we're right up to about 20 billion in a biennium, so about 10 billion a year. So we're basically 4 times a full general fund budget. So we need to do a full performance audit. I know my opponent has done what I would call a surface audit of KTRS, but we need to do a full performance audit and look at that. I know I went back and read through the KTRS had an actuary come in a few years ago, and that actuary said that the increase from the $6 billion unfunded to almost $14 billion, more than 50% of that was not hitting the investment thresholds, a little over 50%. Less than 10% was due to the fact that the state didn't fulfill their obligation in that regard, or the requested obligation.
Do you suspect there are areas where tax dollars are being wasted that have not been identified, or that where things are not transparent enough for voters?
Well, I think in our pension funds, I don't think that they are as transparent as they need to be, and that's that's something that we definitely got to pursue. But there's other areas of state government. I think there's always opportunity to find additional waste, fraud, and abuse. But my big goal is to go in and just make sure that everything is efficient, effective, and ethical. And we want to make sure that one, and I'm not saying that the other individual has done this, but we want to make sure that we don't go in and target somebody because they're of the opposite political persuasion, but we also don't want to give someone a pass just because they share the same party as we do.
Does your record as a state representative, you think, predict that you could be an effective auditor?
I think so. I mean, I've been a state representative now. I'm in the middle of my 7th term. We talked off air. I don't tend to give up. Ran twice and lost twice. When I was first elected, I was the first Republican over in Boyle County in 102 years. But since that time, I've been reelected 6 more for a total of 7 in up until redistricting a heavily Democrat area. So that shows that I'm fair to everyone, regardless of their political persuasion.
You have said that it would be the icing on the cake if you sullied Edlin's name during this campaign. Is your role in part to try to slow his momentum as a political entity in the state?
I don't think I actually used that term. I think someone else kind of quoted that term. I will say that I think it is important. I actually filed a run primarily to run as auditor, and then after I filed, I did receive a call, and it was someone with the Rand Paul campaign that was wanting to help and work with me. And so I think it's important because if you look at right now, I don't even think Adam is focused on this auditor's race, because if you look at his Fancy Farm speech, if you look at some of the super PACs that are running ads, 3/4 of it is really focused on the 2016 Senate race, and maybe 1/4 of it is focused on this race. So we feel like we're going to have an upset. We're going to do a last-second jump shot, as it was, to upset this particular race.
Now, he's told us that he is not focused on that Senate race, that's not on his radar screen, I think were the words he just used here. You don't take him at his word on that.
Well, I mean, all you got to do is look at what he has in his speeches. If you look at, once again, if you pull his Fancy Farm speech, most of it was being critical of Rand and critical of the Republican Party, just a small fraction. There's a couple of super PACs that are running ads on his behalf, and most of those really focus about him in 2016. So to me, I would say that more than likely he's looking past this race. Now, he may say he's not, and I'm not calling him anything along that lines, but, if you just look at the words, you can see.
You're traveling the state a lot? Are you enjoying that?
Traveling the state a lot, enjoying visiting with people. I think this last Saturday we put 400 miles in the car in one day. Saturday before that we put 650 miles in the car in one day. The hard thing is trying to visit with everybody, because you want to visit with everybody, but we do have 120 counties. We have a very limited budget. I mean, we're probably going to be outspent 10 to 20 to 1. But I tell everybody, I've always been the underdog, and we just work hard, and if it's meant to be, we'll be there. If not, the Lord has something else for us.
Representative Mike Harmon, Republican of Danville and the Republican nominee for state auditor. Thanks for coming.
Appreciate
it very much.
Appreciate it.
And we hope you'll stay with us on WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. We'll be back with the independent candidate for Lieutenant Governor, Heather Curtis. That's coming up next. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers from WKYT. She is a qualified candidate for Kentucky Lieutenant Governor, but was not invited this week to take part in a televised debate sponsored by the League of Women Voters. That happened because the ticket headed by her husband, Drew Curtis, did not get enough support in a nonpartisan poll before the time they had set to meet the League's requirement. Heather Curtis is joining us now, candidate for Lieutenant Governor. Thank you for coming. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Did you watch the debate to which you were not invited?
I didn't get an invitation to even be in the audience, but Wednesday nights are Dungeons and Dragons nights with my sons, so we did that. And I do have it recorded, and my husband and I are going to sit down with it over the weekend and watch it and see how I would have responded and rehearse that way, because hopefully we'll be invited to the October 13th one, I believe.
As an independent ticket, there seem to be those higher thresholds at every step of the way. You had to collect a lot of signatures.
Yes.
Now denied access to some of the forums. How do you feel about that?
It's frustrating, but I also understand that the system is in transition. I think there's going to be a lot more independence, and I think the two-party system is trying to hold on to the stronghold that they have. but I think there's going to be a lot more good independent candidates coming through, and so it's going to take a little while for them to adjust. In the meantime, though, it is frustrating. It's like banging your head against the wall saying, no, how can you say we didn't meet criteria when your criteria was set before the official filing date for candidacy? Because the last official poll was done July 30th, and the official last date for filing for candidacy was August 11th. So how can you set that kind of criteria?
How do people react when you say that you're an independent ticket for governor and lieutenant governor of the Commonwealth? First of all, just to the idea of potentially voting for independence. Do they react in an unusual way?
I think people don't really know what to do with it. I think the sense is that maybe independents aren't as serious because we haven't gone through the system, haven't played the game. But on the other hand, people have been willing to listen. People have been willing to say, oh, okay, that's interesting, actually, that makes sense, and I need to look at that some more.
It's unusual for a candidate to choose a spouse as a running mate. I know you get that question when you're out there. How do you think that would work?
So far, it's working really, really well. We're a partnership in every sense of the word. I love him. We're friends. We're parents together. We just do this. I've been the COO of his companies, and especially with this run, we're in sync. We work together really, really well.
How did you meet Drew Curtis?
First day of freshman orientation at college.
Really?
Yes.
Tell us about that and the lives you've built together.
Luther College in Iowa, Decorah, Iowa, northeast corner. Met the very first day. I spent my childhood in Iowa and went there. He's all Kentucky boy, but had godparents that had a child sent there, and met the first day playing Ultimate Frisbee. And he remembers what I was wearing.
Well, that's good. All right, let me hit you with a few issues that the other candidates addressed the other night. Common Core education standards. Support it?
I want to look at it some more. One of my friends works with it in Tennessee, and she's actually for it. So I really need to sit down with her and hash it out with her, because my gut and everything that I've read so far has been very negative and very frustrating for teachers and parents. And before throwing it out, I'd want to look harder.
A statewide smoking ban. At the debate the other night, one candidate was for it, the other did not favor it.
Oh my. That's a hard one. I have to default to the personal liberty argument that if you want to do it, you should do it. But at the same time, smoking is one of the 4 major causes of healthcare costs, that there are things under our control. I also know that, like, all my kids are ADD. My husband's ADD. And smoking is one of those things that, if you're not going to be on Ritalin or an ADD medicine, that helps cope with those kinds of focus issues. So there's so much around it to just put a blanket ban. But on the other hand, I really like the restaurant ban. I really like the bar ban. I think it's made my life better, and I think it's made even smokers' lives better, because then you're in an environment where there isn't smoke all the time.
Sexual harassment in the workplace also came up, including within state government, where it's been a problem even in the legislature. Would you see that as an area that needs to be aggressively addressed and attacked?
Wow. Yeah, I did hear a little bit about that, and yes, my background is psychology. My master's degree is in counseling psychology, and my program was very feminist and very much interested and focused on gender issues and gender inequality and power issues. A lot of sexual harassment is about power. It's not about sex. It's about power and using what you've got available to enforce that power. So what exactly to do about it? I know there's sensitivity trainings and educational trainings, and I know there's a big place for that, but also just addressing those power inequalities and Sorry, it's almost I know too much about this issue to narrow it down. Short answer, absolutely.
Well, and since you would be, if your ticket is elected, both the First Lady and the Lieutenant Governor, is there a special area of emphasis that you would hope to be put in charge of? Would this be a day-to-day ongoing, you're advising the governor kind of scenario, or what?
I think my main role would be that Drew and I do just bounce things off of each other constantly. One of the things that I found that I've really enjoyed in doing this run is I'm an introvert. I'm not the get up in front of a big crowd and speak girl, but I was trained as a therapist. I do love people. It's just as an introvert, it's much easier to deal one-on-one than in a crowd. And what I've done is found people to talk to. I've found friends that are from Eastern Kentucky and really sat down with them for a couple hours and said, tell me about growing up. Tell me about where you grew up. I've found people who are running, there's a group that's sending a satellite up on the space station. I met with Chris Kimmel about that, and just fascinating. And not as a way to say, you know, hey, look at how great we are, vote for us, but as a way to go, what is about Kentucky? Tell me more about why you're here. Tell me, let me learn. And I would love to do more of that and see how I could translate more of that back to him and see how we could make Kentucky do more for Kentucky.
Heather Curtis, candidate for Lieutenant Governor, thank you for being with us. We appreciate it.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us for WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. I'll see you bright and early this week on WKYT This Morning. Make it a good week ahead.